Episode 6, Encounter. Mimiru is pissed. BT tricked her, and Tsukasa got captured for it. She can't actually prove that BT had anything to do with it, but it's the most obvious answer. BT, however, is remorseless. It's simple. She wants the key of the Twilight, and the only way to get it done is to get Tsukasa in one place and keep him there. If possible, she would like to speak to him in person, but she's smart enough to know that information can easily flow to her as long as she plays it close to the vest. She doesn't even really admit to deliberately tricking her. She just heard a rumor, and Mimiru was the one who really got Tsukasa captured, which is of course an unfair accusation, and makes BT another B word that I can think of. It kinda makes you wonder if you were to take her name and just add a couple letters to it, you might find that she is a betrayer. You cannot trust this woman, but you also can't really do anything about it right now. In the end, the only one who lost here is Bear, who unfortunately has to be the one to calm both sides down. At first I thought it was strange that he was so calm about being blatantly tricked by BT. Then I considered it from a Guardian's perspective that I'm sure he has. And though he couldn't pull the trigger himself, he probably felt that capturing Tsukasa was necessary, even if the way they did it was pretty brutal. People are getting hurt, and they need answers, and Tsukasa is just too unpredictable to leave to his own devices. It's a line of thinking that reminds us that Bear is much older and more mature than the 15-year-old Mimiru, who obviously acts more on her pathos than her logos. In the next scene, we see Subaru entering the dungeon where Tsukasa is being detained by the knights. She tells Silver Knight that she wishes to speak with him alone, an order which he begrudgingly submits to, having already disobeyed her once. It's at this time that I want to say how much I hate the YouTube copyright system. This scene has some of the most beautiful music that I have ever heard, and I wish I could share the scene itself, but unfortunately I cannot. I'll put a link in the description to the song and I hope you listen to it. Subaru treads carefully in this scene, not wanting to spook Tsukasa too much. I'm not sure how much she knows about who Tsukasa is in real life, but I'm sure she's certainly aware of what he's been through. If you remember from the last episode, I explained that as far as Tsukasa is concerned, he is in prison right now for the crime of just existing and wanting to be left alone. Even if you consider that he hurt people in real life, you can easily argue that from his perspective, it was all self-defense. He doesn't know what will happen if he dies in the game. He has no idea if he will respawn, or even if you don't kill him, he can definitely feel pain in the game. It actually makes me wonder what the pain ratio is to direct HP for him, because if a high-level character like Silver Knight hits him for half his HP, what kind of pain can Tsukasa expect to feel? None of this is ever explained in the show, but it's important to remember that as long as Tsukasa is in the world, he is in mortal danger, especially considering we know that Bear found her in the hospital. Sidebar. So, sometimes I'm going to flip the pronouns of Tsukasa because he is as close to the exact definition of gender fluid as you can get. You can tell as you get to know him in the game that he isn't exactly what you would call manly in the conventional sense. He obviously retains a good amount of his personality from his previous life as a girl, but has taken on a few male traits that might just come from the simple fact that she thinks she is a boy. If you watched the show already, you should know that Subaru ends up being a love interest with Tsukasa, which brings up the question of if her sexuality changed because in the game she is male, or was she always interested in girls? We really don't know because we don't spend any time at all with Tsukasa in the outside world. It also makes sense that he would connect more with Subaru and Mimiru, seeing as he would also be about the same age as them in real life. I also don't feel like this was a deliberate commentary of gender roles or any of that 2017 stuff we're swimming in nowadays. It's just one more interesting concept that Dot Hack felt like inserting into the story, and another example of the writing being a bit ahead of its time. Subaru tells Tsukasa that because I don't have enough power, I made you go through a terrible ordeal. She feels like if she were stronger, wiser, or a better person, then she could have figured out a scenario where no one was forced to go through any hardship. Tsukasa says her perfume smells nice. He also tells her that he can feel pain in the world. This revelation is tough for her to completely trust, but it's also hard to ignore all the evidence that she's seen. She tells him that as long as he isn't too reckless, they have no reason to detain him. He agrees, but makes her promise to have her men leave him alone as well, which actually seems kind of hard to promise knowing that they literally just disobeyed her a few minutes ago. Finally, she asks him if he has heard of the Key of the Twilight. He says it's the first time he's ever heard of it. Unfortunately, it doesn't really answer the question for her on whether the key exists or not. It just confirms that if it does, he's not aware of it. In the next scene, Mimiru confronts Sora about what happened to Tsukasa. and he plays coy with her. Sora, realizing that he's probably on the losing side of the information stick when it comes to Tsukasa, decides to play both sides and recruits Mimiru to bust Tsukasa out, though I'm not sure how much help he really needed.
試していい？何？俺、裏切るね。
Ha, that's just funny. This scene solidifies two things in my mind. One, that Sora is the coolest character in the show by a very wide margin, and two, that there is no single character that's as dangerous as he is. He betrays Silver Knight and Subaru with no regard for retribution from them in the future. He doesn't care who they are. He's the strongest player, and when he wants something, he takes it. Anything else is just playing with his food. Subaru asks Tsukasa to not go with him, but he leaves anyways and just tells her not to chase him. Unfortunately for the new duo, there's someone waiting for them at the door. The one man who is actually able to go toe-to-toe with Sora. Krim pities Sora for being so powerful but not using his power for good. Sora makes fun of him, calling him an anachronist, which is just a big word for old-fashioned. Krim is role-playing as sort of a main character type hero of justice. That's why he created the Knights in the first place. Sora, on the other hand, just wants to have fun and doesn't understand why anyone would play a video game as if it were real life. It's why he kills whoever gets in his way and doesn't mind annoying everyone he comes across. These two personalities were always going to be rivals, which leaves Tsukasa as the third wheel, who takes off immediately, having no reason to stay for either of them. Waiting outside for Tsukasa is Mimiru to escort him out of the field. The following conversation proves that Mimiru understands Tsukasa the best, even with what little they have spoken with each other. She wants Tsukasa to know that she had nothing to do with the Knights, and says that she knows it sounds selfish to want that, which can be confusing if you don't understand Tsukasa's perspective like she does. She wants him to know that she had nothing to do with the bad things that just happened, which means that she, in a way, is only worried about his perception of her, as opposed to actually being worried about him. This is, of course, crazy logic, but in order to get anything out of him, you essentially have to play his game. He is getting impatient with her and asks if he can go. You really can't help but feel bad for Mimiru, who's doing her best to understand him and help him, but he's just stonewalling her. From his perspective, everyone involved is to blame. It doesn't matter if Mimiru was tricked into it. She caused him harm because she wanted to be involved in his life. He wants everyone out, and isn't in the mood to free Mimiru of her own guilt, which is basically what she asked for in his mind. It's these kinds of scenes that make me understand why people really hate Tsukasa almost as much as Shinji Ikari. You have to see things from his perspective, and have to empathize if you want to understand the character, or else you're just gonna get frustrated with him. What doesn't help is that she's trying to keep him here so Sora can talk with him, which doesn't sit well with Tsukasa. He's thinking, of course you have an ulterior motive. You're other people. You don't care about me. You're just another liar trying to cover your tracks. Now, I want to preface this by saying that I'm not a doctor. I am a hack fraud cartoon reviewer. So when I say what I'm going to say, it comes from personal experience and should not be taken as a diagnosis. Even though I think it's pretty obvious that Tsukasa is by definition a person with deep depression. One of the most telling signs of depression from my experience with several depressed people in my life is a self-fulfilling circular logic when it comes to other people. For example, if no one has called you or texted you on your phone today, you, a person without depression, might just think, people must be busy, or not think anything at all. A depressed person thinks, oh, well, of course no one would call. I wouldn't call me. They're probably all laughing at me, or they only call when they need something. A depressed person fills in the blanks of other people's logic. In this case, Tsukasa can't possibly believe that someone is genuinely out to help him because no one in his life has ever done that. No one except Morgana, who helped him escape the hell that was other people. So every time someone gets caught in a lie or being disingenuous, it just confirms the bias that he already has about everyone. He leaves Mimiru immediately, and Sora, unfortunately for him, doesn't get his chat. Silver Knight, just getting back from his ass kicking, tells Subaru that they should reissue the warrant for Tsukasa's arrest. Subaru denies that request, making good on her word to Tsukasa that he would be left alone, for the time being. She says she has a plan, but doesn't share it with Silver Knight quite yet, fully aware that he'll just argue with her. She tells him that Tsukasa was a prisoner, even before they captured him. In the next scene, we see Mimiru venting her frustrations with Bear. She realizes that she was maybe a bit too hasty to find a reason to talk with Tsukasa. She questions Bear about why he covered for BT, even though it was him who realized that BT tricked them in the first place. He clarifies that he only thinks that she tricked them, reminding her that they have no real proof of that. He tells her that the logical conclusion of confronting BT about tricking them was just her denying it, so there's no real point in the argument. Later on, Mimiru passes by BT again, but this time, BT gives her a real story. Apparently, there are reports of the Guardian cannibalizing monsters in the fields. This story makes its way to Subaru and Silver Knight. Silver Knight suspects that this is a retaliation for the capture of Tsukasa, and Subaru thinks it's too soon to suspect Tsukasa again. She suspects that Tsukasa is more than likely a victim, and that there's a greater force at work in the world. She mentions that two other players, Balmung of the Azure Sky and Orca of the Azure Sea, have also noticed the same phenomena and are investigating. These two we will learn about much later, but for now, Subaru gives Silver Knight what she calls very abstract orders, mostly because she doesn't know where the source of the flow that has surrounded Tsukasa is coming from, but she does know that they need more information before they can make a move. On Tsukasa's end, we see that he has fallen deeper into his old habits. He never wants to see or talk to anyone again. This is, of course, exactly what Morgana wants, which brings the episode to a close. Well, that was episode 6, and if you've stuck with me this far, thanks for that, and I'll see you in episode 7.